Guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Brandy and we talk about all things freelance. In this particular series, we are going to be interviewing freelancers from all over the world, finding out how they run their successful freelance business and of course, how they gain clients. If you guys like my content, make sure to subscribe and I hope you guys enjoy. So Ariel, if you just want to introduce yourself.
Sure. So my name is Arielle. I'm now mainly a front-end developer. My background was C#, full stack .NET, Microsoft Shop sort of thing. So now I mainly do front-end stuff. So that's like React, JavaScript, the full thing.
I hear it can be a jump going from that to JavaScript. I know Josh's dad is actually a .NET developer and now he's learning JavaScript and he has all sorts of questions.
Right. Yeah, it definitely was. But I can't even remember like that transition, to be honest. And it wasn't that long ago. But yeah, I think like for me, I did a lot of my JavaScript learning like on weekends and after my 9 to 5 at that time. So like that's a blur to me in terms of the transition. But it definitely was a change coming into JavaScript, which we all know very different. So that's mostly. I am from Trinidad and Tobago, but Trinidad, and that's based in the Caribbean. And yeah, I don't know anything else.
Do you have any siblings? Where do you like live with family? Any fun facts you could tell us about you besides programming?
Sure. Yeah, I have two siblings actually. I have an older brother and older sister, so I'm like the baby. And I have I'm like deeply in love with my dog. He is not the best behaved, but he's still like my child, I guess. So he is like extremely spoiled. And his name is Kingston Marley. So
I like that.
Yeah, and I guess I can go into like, of course, like I live on an island, so I love going to the beach and all those sorts of things. So yeah.
That's awesome. That's really cool. So you are a mostly front end, but you're full stack. You have a wide range of skills when it comes to programming. And I know you've been freelancing for a while, and that's what I'm curious about. So how did you get into freelancing?
Right. So my first like paid, I guess, freelance job, strangely enough, I will not advise anybody to do this, but my alma mater, which is like my old high school, came into the office that I worked at once, and they were looking to do a website for the school. And well, of course, like when I saw them come in, like the teacher, like we knew each other, so I went and I spoke to her and I was like, hey, how you doing? And like after that meeting, she messaged me and was like, the code that they got from the company that I worked at was a little too high for them, and what they budgeted. And she more or less kind of asked me if I would do the site for them. So like that was my first, like I quoted maybe about half of what my company, granted, like a company has to charge more because they have employees. So like I was able to like slip in there and yeah, that's how I landed my first client. But it wasn't that I went behind my employer's back. I didn't know that was my alma mater, and like at the end of it, I built something for my alma mater, my old high school. So yeah, that was my first freelance job.
Which is really cool. I think, utilizing people that you already know or those connections that you have is one of the best ways. My first freelance job was for a teacher while I was going to college.
Right.
And so it's definitely about connections. And, like you said, when you're working at a company or an agency, they have a lot of overhead.
Yeah.
So they're always going to charge more. And as somebody who's starting out in freelancing, I always tell people that's one of your kind of not like secret weapons, but tools you can use is to actually undercut in price, because you yourself don't have as much overhead as a big agency or company.
Yeah. Yep.
And so since that first job, when was that?
That was maybe in 2016, 15 or 16, somewhere there. Yeah.
And so since then, how many freelance clients have you had, or projects, or what has kind of been your, schedule or consistency with that?
Right. So since then, I've maintained, like side notes, I've maintained a 9 to 5 for like a bit. So since then, in terms of like freelance clients, I've had, wow, it's hard to count. I would say like 5 major clients. And well, a lot of it, of course, is like recurring stuff and all of that. So I've probably had about 5 major clients within the last few years. Some of those periods where I wasn't actively freelancing per se. But yeah, could be more.
So reoccurring? Do you want to explain that a little bit?
Sure. So like once I build a relationship with a client, and they have more web needs or just any sort of development needs, they more or less come back to me and say, hey, we have this other project and we've already worked with you, so we kind of just want to get this going. We already know how you're going to work, etc. In addition to also like maintaining and reiterating on stuff that has already been built. It's also like progressively making things better and adding new features and all of those. Yeah.
So when you go into a contract with somebody, do you have that retainer model set up, or to keep those reoccurring?
In some cases, I do. In some cases, so I do set, for example, like a client I have right now, they have a huge conference, which is like the core of their business at the end of every year. So like that is in December of this year. And so like they want to engage an app and do over the event website and all those things for the event. So I've engaged in a contract with them for like the months leading up to the event and after as well. Just to ensure that like I am the main tech person for that year until the end of the event. So like that's a case that I do a recurring contract, and I said, okay, so this is the amount of hours I would offer per month at this rate. And any deviation from that, any additional hours, of course, is an additional rate, and those things like per month. And alternatively, I also do like if I build a one-time project, I guess. Most cases there is like a maintenance thing that happens monthly, and I also do just because like a lot of the clients that I have worked with particularly are almost in startup phases. So what we tend to do is sort of like release a project or an app in phases. So like I would know, okay, phase 2 would be these features, and phase 2 will be contracted at the end of phase 1 and those sort of things. So
And just a touch on that. So everybody who is, watching this and listening, something really important to note that she does is she puts her contracts in specific phases. So she's very aware of her clients' needs up front, which I'm assuming she does by asking questions and getting to know them and understanding their problems. So she's able to phase out her contracts so they almost go in chunks. So she can, it's almost like forecasting her work schedule ahead of time because she's chunking out the specific projects. Is that correct? Would that be a good way of saying how you do that?
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, because a lot of my clients are like startup, I almost assume sort of a consulting role in the initial. And so I said, okay, how much, like based on your budget, based on what's going to be feasible, like we're going to set this out into phases. And it works out well on both ends because, like, I mean, as a freelancer, it really, really adds to like just your reputation to like show that you're interested in like what the client is doing and interested in, allowing them to succeed in terms of, okay, this is going to be better, this is a better approach for this, etc. So yeah.
So how much time up front do you spend with a new client? So this would be someone you haven't worked with before. How much time do you allocate to them up front without getting paid to really sort of flesh out their problem and understand it? So how many like meetings or how much time would you say does it take you to have those conversations? And then also the time that it takes you to like fully assess the situation and sort of make your plan for them.
Right. I typically try to have at least 2 meetings. And if not in between those meetings, based on the first meeting, I go in knowing the questions I'm going to ask. And then based on that, I try to have like a sort of scope of work, like a requirements list of what I gathered from that first meeting for them before the second meeting. Or it happens after the second meeting. And then once I present that to them, most likely like a lot of the communication happens like online, by email. Okay, yeah, we want this, we change this. In terms of like, I mean, if I go into specifics like wireframing and stuff, like I do, like I wouldn't get into that phase until we've engaged into the contract and stuff. So like I just do like all the requirements gathering and scope of work, which I guess then if you time it out, may take like anywhere between 2 to 3 weeks, depending on how soon we get the 2 meetings initially. Yeah.
And that's very, very, very important. Just to reiterate, I know for a lot of people that are getting into freelance, it's so important to have those conversations up front and then also continually throughout the project. So the next question is, how do you communicate with your clients throughout the course of your project with them? First, sort of, are there other team members, maybe other developers that you're working with? And then what would be your best or favorite tool or your most used tool that you use to communicate with them on an ongoing basis throughout the scope of the project?
Right. So for my less techie clients,
I have those.
Yeah. I typically communicate over WhatsApp. So like that's mainly the way they communicate. Like it's pretty common for them to have that app. So we communicate over WhatsApp and of course email. And like for those that are a bit more established and technically advanced, of course Slack. Like Slack is probably like the number one tool I use and recommend. I'm probably on Slack more than any other app now. So that's what I use more or less to communicate with my clients. And I haven't particularly had clients that have been extreme strangers to me thus far. I've known or met all of my clients in some other capacity so far. So it's been like a sort of mutual, sort of very conversational tone with most of them. And other developers, yeah, Slack, everything is collaborated over Slack. Like because I'm front end mostly now, I try as much as I can to have another developer do like the back end stuff. So yeah.
And so communication is key, basically making sure that all the parts are moving and they're moving together the right way.
Yeah.
All right, so one big question, since you said you are outside of the US, how, I know you and I have spoken off, or actually we've spoken on Slack before, and you've noted that you have US clients, and that's a really hot question for people that are not in the US is, one, how do you get US clients? What do you do?
Right. So this is kind of tough for me to answer because my US clients, like I said before, a lot of my clients I've met in some capacity. Like one of my first US clients, I met them through a business competition. So I, like, at the point, I was working with a team from West Point, USMA, and they presented one of my apps at a business competition, and one of the advisors to the team was like my first client. And like I guess in a way we did reconnect on LinkedIn, and that's how like we started talking about development work.
But you still entered a competition, right?
Yeah.
So that in itself is a big thing, and that's huge kudos to you for doing that, because I don't think a lot of people do that or even know how to utilize that. So how did you find this competition?
So I found this competition through like a family member. So like the West Point class at that time was US citizens would probably know what West Point is. West Point Military Academy.
Military school.
So I had a cousin that went there, and I had an app locally that got funded by the government and all of those things. It was a children's app, an educational app. So based on the fact that it was an educational app and their team needed to go to Mid-Hudson, I think it was the Mid-Hudson Regional Business Plan Competition, I think is the name. Like I joined their team and we took that to the competition. So that's how I landed there, just mainly through that. I sort of like piggybacked on that group. I mean, it was my like app idea, I guess, that went to the competition, but they did like most of the like business plan stuff for that competition. I did this stuff like when I did it locally. And that's how I got to that competition. Yeah.
So she entered a competition, which is insane. Like that is really cool. Would it be something similar to, because I know you said business competition, but you had an app that you built with it, probably like proof of concept.
Yeah.
So would it be similar to say that also entering like hackathons or anything like that could also, have the same results or maybe the same fruits of your labor?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. I like my first like I actually decided to be a developer based on attending a startup weekend.
Cool.
And while I was there, I met some developers that I already knew, and then some new ones, and like from there, I kind of just like I spent that weekend basically with my laptop and with a desk of really good developers. Yes, I had extreme imposter syndrome because I knew nothing at the time, and I was still in college. And although I was in college, I still felt like I knew nothing. So so that was my first, like I think getting my foot in the door, and I met a lot of developers there who like later on became like a network of like working on projects with them and those sorts of things. So I would definitely recommend hackathons and meetups and those things. Yeah.
100%. I'm all about that. I think community, your network, like the connections you make with people, whether it's online, in person, they really matter. They're relationships, right. And relationships are so important to have with people. You touched on something that I actually wasn't going to ask about, but you said it.
Right.
It's a question I get asked all the time, but imposter syndrome. You said you were dealing with it when you were still in college. Do you deal with it now? What was it like then? What's it like now? How do you handle it? All that stuff.
Right. Yeah, I deal with it every day. I don't know if it will ever go away. The only times where I feel like I don't feel it is like if I have a breakthrough with code or something like that, then I feel like, yes, I can do this. Like I am a real developer. So I don't know necessarily like how I deal with it. I guess like I just keep building things. I just keep doing it, and I guess that whole I can attitude sort of thing. And I reach out to people. I reach out when when I'm stuck on something or anything like that. But yeah, I just keep going. I guess I don't know how do you like fully get over imposter syndrome? Is it possible to? I don't know.
I don't think so. I think you have it. I mean, I have it all the time with even the new stuff, like
right.
Things that are even outside of programming. I think it's just one of those things. It's, like you said, you just keep going. And I think you and I are similar in that we just keep doing things because that's really the only way you combat it.
Yeah.
All right. So one last question. What would be one piece of advice you would give to somebody who is wanting to start freelancing?
Like just start building things and like build a reputation and always have something to like show. Like for me, I think my momentum, like I gained momentum once I started building things, one, and two, like meeting people, and people can actually like say that they personally know me. And so like when people say, hey, they like a lot of my jobs are based on recommendations. Like I do zero like marketing and those sorts of things. I'm not on any of those Upworks or freelancer sites. I'm not on any of those things. So a lot of it is like recommendations, word of mouth. I've met a lot of my clients through Slack channels and stuff. So my advice would be put things out there and just like ensure that your online presence is like, I guess, carded to what you want to show, like, the kind of jobs you want to attract, those sorts of things. That would be my advice.
That's amazing. And one thing in there that she said, but she didn't say, but she gets all of her jobs based on recommendations. And I'm assuming it's because she does awesome work, but I'm assuming that Ariel is great to work with. She's clearly good at communicating with teams. She's good at probably meeting deadlines. So there's all this stuff. And so when people like you and you build that relationship with them, they're definitely going to recommend you and your services to other people. And I think that's really, really important.